So hi everyone, I'm Stephen Neville, CEO of BugHerd, here to run this webinar on how to run great website development projects and retain your clients. So just quickly, I guess as a background, I'm been with BugHerd now about 6 years, but have before that a long career in website development, client management through advertising industry, something I've always been interested in. And so I've got a couple of our customers here, Sophia Spiridakis and Sai Sumar from Bartley Dick Communications in the US. It's very early in Australia here. It's 6 a.m. So if I look a bit tired, that's probably why. But yeah, I'd love, I'll introduce these guys, but just very quickly, a little bit of housekeeping. So if you have any questions throughout the session, please just chuck them into the Q&A box, and I'll manage those and make sure that we get those questions asked to Sophia and Sai. We've got some time scheduled that we'll kind of go through those at the end, and then also we'll be sending out contact details if we don't get to your question, so we can follow up with any answers that are needed. So very quickly, welcome Sai, welcome Sophia. Very great to have you here. Let's start with brief introduction on you guys and Bartley Dick Communications.
Perfect. Hey, everybody, whether you're joining from the States or Australia, good afternoon, morning, evening. I am a senior strategist at Bartley Dick. I've been with the agency for over 2.5 years now, and I have about 5 years of experience working on web projects. My background is actually in food and beverage marketing, but I've always been on the agency side, and I've always loved managing client relationships. One of my clients from 10 years ago, we're still in touch. We still send each other, pictures of our cats all the time. So I do really love the client relationship building side of things. Sophia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sophia Spiridakis. I'm the creative project manager at Bartley Dick. I've been at B&D for about 1.5 years, but I've spent the last 5 years working on web projects. So I do actually have a background in graphic design, but over time, I kind of developed an interest in tackling process-related challenges. So naturally, that kind of led me into the strategy of project management and making client engagements easier and more productive.
And just briefly, I guess, for Bartley Dick, what kind of work, what type of clients do you mainly work with?
Super quick overview of B&D. So Bartley Dick is a full service marketing and creative agency based out of New York City. So we help marketers grow their brand and win customers through powerfully persuasive communications. Just a quick overview of what we do. We are a full suite agency. So everything from integrated campaigns, brand building, web design and development, and video and animation. Similar to BugHerd, we are a small but mighty team of senior leadership. But we do leverage a vast network of subject matter experts, specialists, and other like-minded creative agencies to help deliver a wider suite of solutions for our clients. In terms of clients, we are actually vertical agnostic, so we work across industry, but we've done a lot of work with clients in tech, higher ed, food and beverage, and B2B. We like to say that we don't specialize in one industry, but we specialize in results.
Excellent. All right, great, thank you. So yeah, the thing we're going to focus on today is how to run great website development projects and retain clients. And I think they go hand in hand together. I've been on both sides of that fence, so I've been a client and I've been running website development projects. Unlike you, Sophia, I'm not quite as process oriented. So I think you're going to be able to offer some insight that we can all learn from. But to start with, I guess, Sai, I'll aim at you. How do you get to know clients at the beginning of a project?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, everything that both Sophia and I share, we've really learned and figured out through trial and failure of things. So, a lot of the processes that we have put in place, it's because things didn't go as we wanted them to go. And so we always like to look back and say, okay, how do we make this better? But, when a project's kicking off, what we like to do is send a client a Google form that kind of helps them outline what they need, what they already have, what their budget is, timeline, things like that, just so that even before a discovery call, we get a head start in planning around, any gaps that we need to fill. Then we'll jump into a discovery call with any of the key stakeholders and really learn, what it is that they're looking for from this project, but also just their bigger business objectives. A lot of the times clients will come to us with what they want, but it's really our job to figure out what they need. So after the discovery call, we'll start to put a marketing brief together, and that's where we really start to blend those two together. There have been times where a client will come to us and say, hey, we want an email drip campaign. And we want new leads, or we want something or another. And what we'll learn is that, you actually need a new pillar page, and you need, gated content to lead people to, and that the leads that you have might be outdated or not the right type. So really just spending time understanding what the big picture objective is versus just delivering on exactly what the client is saying.
Yeah, great. And do you spend time upfront with deciding what success looks like in a project, and how do you, what's your process around that? How do you communicate it back?
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's really important for, again, a client might say, we want an awareness campaign, and we want, we want display ads, or, they want something that's awareness, but they're looking for leads. And we have to really make sure that the tactic that we're doing is matched with the actual outcome of it. So if we're doing a print campaign, but they want to know what the conversion rate is, it's important for us to understand that as a marketing agency, we're being hired as the expert. And so making sure that we're setting ourselves up for success, saying that, okay, this is an awareness campaign, so you're looking at these metrics, or this is a conversion campaign, so we can track leads. I think beyond just defining success, just making sure that there is alignment with how we're actually getting there.
Yeah, great. And in my experience, one of the causes, particularly for web development, but for all things, one of the causes of tension, I guess, is where there is a misalignment sometimes between what the client needs and the fit for your agency, your team. How do you manage that early on? And if do you ever say no?
Yeah, I mean, recently we had someone approach us, and they wanted a go-to-market campaign for a new product that they're launching. And so, our job would really be to get people to that website to use the program. But what we realized is that the website itself doesn't have the best UX, and it doesn't have a great experience once someone's on the website. So for us to go back to them and just say, yeah, we can, get people to your website, but we can't really guarantee that they're going to convert or do what you want there. So in that case, we'll either recommend, hey, we actually need to make some tweaks to the website as well, just so that you don't come back to us and say you're not delivering on what, we asked for, or we'll, put like a big warning that says, we can bring people to your website, but we can't really guarantee what happens after. And so I think budget versus expectation, end goal versus tactic. If someone wants to be the first on a Google search page and they want it in 3 months, we'll have to say no to that, because we understand that through an SEO strategy, we're not going to move you from page 6 to page 1 in 3 months. So there's definitely, we are great at delivering results when we know we can, but we have to say no when we can't.
So the theme I'm hearing, I guess, is one around just clear communication and expectation management.
Definitely.
Yeah, great. So Sophia, for you, I guess we'll move on. So can you think, at the beginning of a project, you've taken on a web development project, what's your kind of onboarding process for a client, and how do you set up success from the earliest stages?
So we always will start by using our project management software, which is Clickup, where we have a project setup checklist. So a couple of the things that includes, the first thing, we like to walk the client through the contract to make sure that they are clear and aligned on the project scope. This is really setting yourself up for success, and also it avoids any surprises down the road with the client. We also like to set up a timeline from the start and then walk the client through any key dates so that they know what they're responsible for, when they'll be receiving things, and also just making sure they know our process in general, in terms of like how many rounds of edits and things like that. We also like to send them a technical requirements document. So this includes a list of things that we might need access for, like different accounts, or different assets that we might need in order to start. We always like to set up a discovery call in the beginning, and then also set up a cadence of check-in meetings. Sometimes these are weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, depending on the project.
And I guess clients change their mind throughout a process sometimes. As I said, you have rounds of edits, things like that. What do you, how do you manage that?
So I think it's really important to be transparent upfront. So if something is out of scope, we definitely want to let the client know that. We actually had a recent example of that where a client came to us with a large amount of edits later in the project. It was like our third round of revisions at that point. And we had already kind of exceeded the amount of hours allotted to that part of the project. So we did go back to them and let them know this, and we were able to get additional budget for a certain amount of hours for the project. On the other hand, there was a time where we were transparent with the client. They actually came to us with a template that they hadn't given us in the beginning of the project, but they asked us to use the template like halfway through. And we did let them know, like, this does actually change the scope. It will incur an additional fee. And they actually decided to not go with the template and just move forward with what we were working on. So, I mean, we definitely are we always try to be super flexible with our clients. So if they are out of budget, but they really want something to be done, we'll always try and work with them to get it done, and maybe pull budget from different areas of the project.
Yeah, I think it's a dual responsibility. I've been the client on the other side of that as well, and sometimes late things happen, but also in your job, it can managing those changes can be a challenge. So you've onboarded. You said you use Clickup through that process. What tooling are you using through, and kind of what's your process for project management ongoing?
Yeah. So here I'm gonna pull up our list of tools that we use. So at the start of a project, we like to create a project tracker, which we actually use Google Sheets for, because it has to be custom for each client. So this custom project tracker is definitely one of the most important things when we're starting a project, where it has a list of deliverables for a project, or if it's a client that we have multiple projects going on at the same time, we can keep track of the different statuses and next steps and some important links in there. Clients do have access to this document, and we do use it for agendas as well when we're going through on those bi-weekly, weekly calls that I mentioned earlier. We also use EverHour, and EverHour is a integration that you can put into Clickup to be able to manage time, and this ensures that we're not going over budget, not spending too many hours, just keeping track of all of that. Specifically for web projects, we do use BugHerd for keeping track of feedback, things like that. Let me take this off. A couple of other things to make sure that we're staying on track. We set up those weekly calls. In terms of communications via email, it's super important to send detailed emails that include everything that you'd like to get across, but still being clear and concise, because clients don't always read everything. That's just the reality of it. So you want to make sure you're being detailed, but also concise, that they can, take it in bit-sized pieces. And I think lastly, I would say we like to use an AI call attendant. The one that we like to use is actually called Parrot. And this allows us to have call notes taken while we're on the call, so we can focus on, talking with the client. And if there's anything that we need to go back and check on, we have that. We have the AI script to reference.
Right. So I've got a couple of questions. One which certainly I was interested in on that, but what profile? So what platform is the custom project tracker in? And I was very interested when we spoke about this because you don't use Clickup to do this, and you explained why. So it'd be great maybe if you could share your custom project tracker and describe that. And then the other question was, are there additional benefits to EverHour for tracking rather than using built-in tracking in functionality of Clickup? So we'll come back to that one.
Yeah, definitely. So the reason that we use Google Sheets over ClickUp for this project tracker is because if we ask the client to now learn another platform that they might not know, it's overwhelming to them. So we want to make sure that we make it as easy as possible for them. We don't want to make them do any extra work that they don't need to do. So that's the main reason for not using Clickup. Clickup, we try to keep internal as much as possible, because it's also, if you're sharing Clickup where we have a lot of our, all of the details, it's almost showing them too much. They might get overwhelmed. It's better to just keep exactly what they need to see, like the deliverables, the due dates, next steps, just super clear. And then in terms of using EverHour, so EverHour does have more capabilities than like ClickUp's internal capabilities. So we like to use it because you can create like custom reports. So if we have, that we like to use it for going back if we need to reference like how many hours we've spent on something. It helps us actually scope projects in the future as well. So not just current projects, but if we need to go back and see like a similar project that we worked on, you can kind of really customize a report and see like where exactly those hours were spent, like what we were spending them on, things like that.
Okay. And so another couple of questions. This is obviously a area of interest, but how are you delivering initial wireframes copy to the client and getting feedback? So you said you use BugHerd for feedback, which obviously I know, but the question is, I assume that's for once things are in development. So what are you doing prior to BugHerd? And I'll just give us a little plug. We are starting to do feedback on designs as well. But yeah, currently, what are you using for that process, Sophia?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, that's really exciting if we can use BugHerd from the start. So, I mean, beginning, we will always send a copy doc first if we're writing the copy for something. And the next stage, once copy is approved, we will move it into a wireframe phase. But we do understand that like the wireframe is super important to being able to visualize everything. Yeah, we will make sure that they can improve as much as they can of like the general outline before we move into development and then move into BugHerd and things like that.
Is that Figma as tooling?
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Figma or Adobe XD, or what's the?
So we find with actually sending it to them, we'll either do a Word doc or ideally a Google Doc or a PDF, something where it's easy for them to track changes. When it comes to while we use XD internally or Figma, unless the client is already well versed in any of those programs, it ends up just becoming more work to try to explain how it works and how to provide feedback and where to put notes. So we'll often just send a copy doc or a PDF and then ask for typed notes as opposed to handwritten notes, because I think everybody knows that deciphering clients' handwriting on a scanned document just really makes it more difficult.
Well, look, the great news here is we are beginning to do exactly that, and you can just send it to them in BugHerd, hopefully even on Figma prototypes shortly, but certainly on PDFs you can already do as well. So, so this is like customer research at the same time. Next question, which is how transparent are you about project hours with the client? That's a great question. I've been on both sides of that as well.
That is a constant discussion that we have internally. We really like to say that we deliver on value versus hours. You know, you could say, hey, I spent 3 hours on this, but if the value is not there, you know, what is the client paying for? But at the end of the day, when it comes to actually creating budgets, scoping projects, and making sure that we're profitable at the end of the day, we do kind of have to fall back on how long are we spending on this project. So the short answer is we try not to fixate on hours to the client. We won't say, hey, we're spending 3, 5, 10 hours on it. We do track everything internally so that, you know, we have had clients come back to us and wanted a full report of everything that we've spent time on. So in that case, we do have everything, but we really try to focus on what the actual deliverable is, the value of it, and making sure that we deliver on that versus saying, you know, we're exactly at 32 hours or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, there can be a challenge though, managing kind of profitability, obviously, within within projects as well. Okay, so moving from kind of tooling on, how do you keep communication on a project very clear and making sure everyone's aligned? You talk through, you know, you have a kind of cadence of weekly meetings, things like that, emails. Are there any other tips that you could share that you think are you know, really key for this?
Yeah, I would say setting yourself up for success like way early on by making sure that your contract is super, super detailed. Just because if you ever need to reference something, or if a client is unclear about your process, or rounds of edits and things like that, like they'll be able to reference that and know exactly what's included. And you're always covered with, you know, what you're providing based on their budget. Sometimes if a client, you know, if we want to try and fit their budget, we might alter something in our process, which we do because we, you know, we want to be as flexible as possible. But as long as you are super transparent upfront and make sure they know that you are altering your process, or you are altering your process in order to fit their budget, and that there might be things that aren't included anymore and things like that.
A couple of other questions here. So, managing the timeline of deliverables when clients aren't sending assets in time, or sending feedback rounds in time, as you know. So how do you know, we get that. We do a lot of customer research, obviously, and one of the main things we hear is that getting feedback on time is, you know, like, you know, issue number one almost in terms of getting things done on time. So yeah, what's your process around that with clients, and any tips that everybody can learn from?
Definitely. We like to use what we call the "this could affect" disclaimer. So making sure that they know that, you know, if something on there and that's a blocker, which they'll know from the start because we'll run through the timeline with them and let them know that they need to give feedback by certain dates, just letting them know that this could affect timeline and budget. So that way they're very clear on that. So that they don't come back and say like, oh, why are we past this initial deadline? So making sure that they know that from the start, and also like letting them know throughout the process that things could change because of that.
Do you think that's when the meeting, like face to face, or, you know, whether it's in face to face or Zoom, just that, you know, having that cadence of meetings is really important, because people ignore email. It's very easy to ignore text messages or WhatsApp or whatever, a little bit harder. You know, you need to do this today or else. But do you think that kind of weekly catch up or bi-weekly catch up is the thing that keeps people on track?
Definitely. We've had times where a client may not honestly answer our emails at all during the week, but we know that we had a call with them at the end of the week. So that's when they would be like, okay, I have to sit down and see like what I'm responsible for, what I owe you, things like that. I think it's very important, especially for clients that don't keep up with emails as much.
Yeah, and we'll also, because we have our timelines in Clickup, if something is running late and we update those dates, then all the dependencies update as well. So we do like to keep sort of like an email written thread of, you know, feedback came in at this time, so this is how it's affecting the remaining dates, just because there are times where at the end of a project, a client will say, well, you delivered it, you know, a month late, and then we can go back and say, you know, due to delayed feedback at these times, you know, just to be able to cover, your tracks and make sure that if there are delays because of the client, then at least there's, an email thread that shows that you've told them that this is why that's happening.
One of the questions here, which I think we've answered, but does ask, is this a common problem that other people face? They're talking about their own issue, and I can say very clearly, after having done it and having interviewed a lot of agencies with BugHerd, this is a very common problem. So if there are any clients on the call, take note that agencies need you to respond in a timely fashion so they can get on with the job. A great question here about who primarily communicates updates on projects. So if you've got multiple, parts within the agency working on different parts of a single project, or there's more campaign work, is it all being funneled through, say, a single account manager, or do different people communicate at different times? What's the way you handle that?
So at the beginning of a project, we always handle roles and responsibilities. So Sophia will make sure that there's an internal kickoff meeting within the team, whether or not you're involved, where you decide, okay, here's the project manager, here's the account manager, here's the creative director, and then within that, what your roles are, to make sure that internally we know, who is reaching out, who's the main point of contact for the client, so that the client is also not confused, but then also who is, working internally within the team to make sure all the assets get passed across.
So it's primarily single person, just to summarize that.
Yes.
Yeah, great. So question is, how long does your typical projects take? So an estimated timeline. So this is a really question, I think, someone trying to understand the timeline for their own project. What's it say, an estimated timeline for a 15-page website with pretty straightforward integrations? So you should always be careful with answering that, because
they're going to come to us after.
Yeah, come and talk to you after. Maybe there's a brief there for you. So
yeah, I would say honestly that's really tough to answer. It depends. Is the copy done? Is the design done? Are we just building the website? Are we starting from the very beginning and doing a full discovery, understanding the content, writing, designing? There's so many different areas where you can start and end the project. So I would be hesitant to give a straightforward answer to that.
Yeah, there's a little bit, how long is a piece of string, as you said, in terms of understanding the full scope of the job. All right, so we'll move through to another one just quickly. So Sophia, Sai, for whoever wants to answer, how do you manage and spot kind of potential risks early on and make sure there's no unpleasant surprises?
I would say, in everything that you do in the beginning is super important. So I know I've said this a million times, but making sure your contract is super detailed is one of the biggest, most important things. And, making sure that the client understands everything about your process. But if something, if an unexpected challenge does come up, I would say another thing would be to be super transparent with your internal team as well. Because there are a lot of times that, if we have any inkling that a client is a little bit unhappy with something about our process, we kind of all have like a group, huddle, and there's always something that, another team member might have a little bit more insight on that you may not have thought of. So I think that's definitely something to remember that you can always do.
Yeah, and I think just adding on to that, sometimes we'll notice like either a lack of engagement from the client right at the beginning of a project, where they're not responding to emails, they're not answering your questions fully, they're changing their mind a lot even before the project starts. So even before the contract is signed and in place, we'll kind of notice a few things that may be red flags for this type of client, especially if we haven't worked with them before. I remember last year we were doing a big project for a new client, and it was a web project, and we weren't given access to all of the platforms that we needed to actually start the project. So everything was ready to go, but they kept delaying access, which was pushing the timeline. And so in that case, we just kind of did a full pause on the project. So no one was spending time, no one was spinning their wheels. And we just let them know that like this project is now on hold until we get everything that we need. So just making sure that you know when to pull the plug and when you're, wasting your time and your agency's time on something.
Yeah. In my experience of client management as well, that sometimes, obviously it depends on the relationship. So relationships are built on trust. If you do if you are open and transparent and communicate things well, it generally builds trust. And then when you have that trust, people respect that sometimes you push back a little bit, and so be able to say, if you're always saying yes, and just kind of going on it, that's when you run into problems. All right. Well, there's a great question here, which is, how does BugHerd help your projects? I didn't even have to ask that myself. This is from someone else.
I'll let Sophia take that.
I would say it's helped us a lot in keeping track of rounds of revisions. There is actually a feature on BugHerd. We like to say this is one of our pro tips of BugHerd for us personally, that you can kind of lock down the project so that nobody can make any further comments. So that's a way for us to say, okay, everything that happens up until this point, this is round one. Just to make sure that the client knows that, and they're not able to kind of sneak in and add any more changes that might delay things and things like that. And anything additional would go into the second round. And I think another feature that we really is super helpful to us is the fact that you can make notes directly on a page element, as opposed to previously, like before we were using BugHerd, when there's handwritten notes, typed out notes or handwritten notes, and trying to explain where they are on the page, it's kind of a nightmare, like trying to figure it out. So, it's not always, the clients don't always explain exactly where it should be, and there could be miscommunications. So that's definitely another big part of it that helps us.
Yeah, great. And so in terms of the rounds of edits, you just disable the project, do you?
Mm-hmm.
Tell
Yep.
them turn it off. They can no longer submit feedback, and then when the next round comes up, you just turn it back on. Yeah, great.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, that's certainly a thing that we get requested a bit, is rounds of feedback. So it's interesting you've kind of got a workaround that's working for you with that. What common challenges have you faced, or do you face mostly in web projects, and how do you overcome them? Any lessons that we can learn from?
Yeah, definitely. So I kind of mentioned this, but getting feedback, that's not in, previous to using BugHerd. If feedback sometimes comes in different email threads, there might be different stakeholders emailing with conflicting feedback, and also chasing clients for access is another kind of challenge that we, which I think that technical requirements sheet that we have started sending out to clients has been really helpful in that, just to make sure that, and we'll let them know, like, we won't get started on this web project until we have proper access, because we don't want to have these roadblocks down the road when we're almost ready to go live. And I would say also, in terms of keeping track of rounds of edits, like, it is super important to do so, just because we might end up going over hours or over budget if we're not staying within our allotted revision amounts. Yeah, I think those are some of the main.
Yeah, great. And so I guess stepping out a little bit as well is in terms of the client satisfaction part of this. So obviously what I've heard a lot of is a good process, very clear communication, some tooling that kind of facilitates that communication as much as anything else. So I was interested in, you said that use a project tracker, which I'll get you to show at the end as well. There's a question for this, but use a project tracker because it's simpler and easy to use than, say, getting the client into Clickup. So I'm aware you're clearly very you're focused around the simplicity of and the communication side of it. Do you, because, measure client satisfaction regularly? Do you have a process around that?
So what we do with that, there's sort of two parts to it. One is we have an internal monthly accounts meeting, which is, full agency leadership. So during that, we'll go through each account that we have, whether it's active or inactive, whether we have a project going on with them or not. If there are projects going on, we just like to, see how the projects are going. Satisfaction is really, you can kind of tell if a client is happy or not. I think it's pretty obvious when it goes one way or another. And so we like to make sure we do a full check-in, make sure everyone on the team knows what's happening. And in the case that we feel like things aren't going great, or there might be some things that we can do better, what we'll do is we'll really just pause, talk about it, find the solution, and then try to implement it. And when we do implement something based on one client, we like to implement it across the board, just so that it doesn't become a solution for one specific problem. But even things that we're seeing from the questions, there's sort of a common thread with things that are happening. So if one client is having problems with something, another client might be feeling the same way. So we just like to make sure that we're implementing everything into our process slowly over time across all accounts to try to mitigate that, down the road as well. And I think short term, email causes so many more problems than jumping on a phone call. So if there's ever a misunderstanding or you feel like a client isn't happy, the first thing that we'll do is always schedule a call as opposed to try to figure it out on email. And I had a call yesterday. There was so much confusion over email. We had a 3-minute call and everything, it was just, we weren't on the same page and everything was fine. So always just jump on a call if you need to.
Yeah, I certainly remember if a client were to call, if you just answer the phone, in their world, it's blowing up. It's a big problem. If you just answer the phone and say, or answer an email, or, in our world, it's now just respond to the support ticket early and say, hey, we're looking into this, that we've got it. And, then kind of regular updates, managers, again, goes back to that trust and, building stronger relationships over time. So I guess in terms of, we've got quite a few questions we'll get to in Q&A. So I guess as a final question here, and what are your top tips, I guess, long-term for staying engaged with clients so you can keep that relationship alive?
Yeah, so I think, one is just delivering on results, say what you're going to do, or do what you're going to say. So that kind of has to do with accountability, just making sure that you're delivering on timelines, but also, big picture goals. Are you actually meeting the objectives that they want to? So that sort of baseline, do what you're going to say you're going to do. And then the second thing is, really what Sophia has been talking about, which is all about communication. So that really goes into clarity and being concise. And then even something as small as following them on LinkedIn before or after a project, engaging with their posts, that really helps with, keeping those relationships going even after a project. So communication all around. And then the last thing is making the process easy and enjoyable. One of our co-founders always says people like working with people that they like. And we're often told that, a client's favorite meeting of the week is the one with B&D. And I think that that's really what, allows us to keep clients for a long time or get referrals and things like that, because we really try not to take ourselves too seriously. We're a marketing and advertising agency. We love what we do, but we also spend a lot of time doing it. So we try to have fun as much as we can.
Okay, great. All right. That's fantastic. I'm going to kind of move into just a few questions that I'll kind of touch on a few bases. So first one, Sophia, was, can you share the custom project tracker that you use for Google Sheets?
Yeah, definitely. There we go.
I think while Sophia brings that up, we do switch this around based on each client and each project and what the important categories are for that. Just the point of it being in Google Sheets is really that it is customizable.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. So it always differs depending on the client, especially because some clients will have, ongoing work for where there'll be multiple projects going on at once, which is a good example with this client here, where we have it set up by project. owner is kind of whether it's something that we are tackling or if it's something that the client's responsible for as part of a project. We have categories here, so because there's different things going on, it's just like an easy way to categorize what type of project it is. We have a status section here. This is important to see, whose hands it's in. If we, deliver the next round of revisions for something, we'll change it to the client review. And if there's a blocker, if we can't move forward with something, we'll change it to blocked. And then we have next steps. So this is important just to see how we're going to move forward. Due dates, any important links to any of the deliverables, and just a notes section at the end. So I would say this is probably one of our most example of one of our most involved project trackers. But for a client that, we can always tone it down or make it more detailed depending on the preference of the client, and things like that. And
so this is the basis of the weekly call, is it, or bi-weekly call, we say, and you really just kind of work through this. So it's functionally like the web document.
Yeah, we definitely use it as our call agendas as like the baseline.
Yeah, and again, just to reiterate, the benefit of Google Sheets versus doing this in a more automated Clickup version or something like that.
Yeah, because we don't want to overwhelm the client with having to learn a new platform, and everyone either knows Excel or Google Sheets. It's familiar to them. A lot of times clients may not even want to actually work in here. They just want to view it. But sometimes even just having someone be invited to a new platform, for example, Clickup, which is what we use, it's just, maybe too many steps that maybe aren't necessary. So just having them work in something that they're familiar with.
So another, thank you for that. Great question, I guess, around resourcing. So if people are on multiple projects, which we do in agencies, that's the factor thing. You work across multiple clients as well as multiple projects. How do you manage resourcing, and what tooling are you using for that?
Definitely. So we use ClickUp in terms of, we have a production call every morning where we run through the priorities for the day and look ahead to the rest of the week. And we can easily see, based on each person's individual task list, which we can view in a calendar view, what they have going on for that day or week, especially if you're planning, ahead. So we can see like how many hours someone will spend on a certain project, within a given amount of days, things like that. So yeah, we use ClickUp for that. And it's really helpful to be able to see what their capabilities are going to be going forward too.
And okay, so next one, how do you handle a client? This is a great question about people. How do you handle a client that isn't agreeing with your recommendations, or maybe is getting a bit argumentative?
So I mean, it's not uncommon for that to happen, I think. One thing to remember is it's good that you're going to them with a recommendation and a point of view on something, because at the end of the day, they're hiring you to be the expert on it. So, when there are multiple options, you definitely want to make sure that you're guiding the client in one way or another. If they are, really set in their ways and want to go in a direction, and sometimes that's okay, and you may not think it's the best option, but the end result might be similar. I think that, at that point, you let the client go with what they want. But I think that if the recommendation is really going to affect the outcome, then you just really need to make it clear that if you don't want to move the call to action to the top of the page, that's going to affect the number of conversions or signups or clicks that you get. I would just say, if you're really unhappy with the direction the client wants to go in, just always make sure it's in writing, because if the results aren't what the client expects and they come back to you and say, hey, why didn't we do this? You can go back and say, this was our recommendation. You decided to go this way with it. And, we had previously mentioned that, it could affect it in this way.
Yeah, great. There's still a few to go here. So Oh, we've shared the project tracker. Sorry, I'm just kind of reading through some questions. Give us a second. So another question around, do you use, like, what's the methodology? Do you use an agile framework of some kind, or?
It kind of depends on the client and their needs. We don't have one specific way, but we like to get an idea of the client's like full needs at the start of a project and kind of adjust from there.
Yep. So just work a little bit. So do you have a set process, or what it said you're dependent on the client?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's depending on client. We definitely have like a process set up for every type of project that we can get. So, you know, when we go and Clickup, we'll use the template for that project. It'll be broken down in a certain way. But because we have such a wide spectrum of projects, from, you know, web development to social campaigns to branding, to, you know, whatever it is, you know, we're working on a go-to-market campaign right now. We really have to kind of be flexible with, you know, the size of the client, how they want to work, but then also what the actual project entails.
Yeah, great. Question here. Our team wants to use content for the designs, but our clients want to use design for content. So as in when you're filling out, so to read, you know, some people want the content first, and then some people want the design first. So the client is saying, I want the design so I can fill in content. And you're saying, hey, we need the content before we can go and do the design. So how do you set up your clients well to write good content that you can use?
Sophia, do you want to take this? We literally just went through 2 projects where this happened. So
Yeah, it's definitely all about being flexible. We do always, it goes back to, you know, making sure that they know what our process is, and that's our process is to start in, you know, copy, move into design, just to make sure, because the design can change a lot depending on what the copy is. So if there's larger copy changes later down the road, it kind of affects scope and budget in terms of the design. But there have been scenarios. There was one recently where we kind of had to backtrack a little bit, where we were getting more copy feedback in the design phase. So we ended up actually going back and adjusting the wireframe again, just because in that specific scenario, they were having a hard time visualizing it. So just all about being flexible where we can, but still letting them know that this is what we recommend, so that, you know, they're not, so that they're aware of that at least.
yeah, and I think we really try to focus on that wireframe phase, because we'll try to get as much, you know, content copy as we can before moving into design. But if they need to visualize it, doing like a black and white easy wireframe and not, you know, putting any design on it, just because, or, you know, if they're adamant on doing the design first, you really just need to increase the budget and the rounds and, you know, put that extra time into it. But you know, best practices are definitely to do the content first, put that into wireframe, spend a lot of time there, and then go into design.
Okay. So we have a couple of questions on this. We talked about it briefly earlier, but it's clearly a point of need for people, is the scope creep. So managing that, you know, changes in clients' requirements as the project's going on, scope creep. Yeah, could you just reiterate, I guess, how you manage that? Because it's you know, it's an obvious problem.
Yeah. One thing that we've found that is really helpful is to have a bucket of hours. So if we notice that something is out of scope and there's a lot of small requests coming in, and we say, hey, we actually have to go and put an estimate on that, or we have to do that, or this is out of scope, what we'll do is we'll recommend and say, it sounds like there's additional design work needed or additional dev work needed. Why don't we do 15 hours of, you know, a production budget for any small changes? And that way, instead of having to go back and forth, we can say, you know, you have this much amount of time every month for anything that you may have forgotten. And that really tends to help bigger projects move more efficiently, just so that you're not continuously going back and forth. The other thing is, in our project trackers, we'll often include in the notes what the scope is, so that when we're reviewing it during our weekly or bi-weekly meetings, they can see that, you know, this includes, you know, copy and design, but it doesn't include development or things like that. But I mean, we deal with scope creep all the time as well.
So a
And
lot of this is, oh, sorry, Sophia.
That's okay. I just wanted to also add on top of that, and a big reason why we really love EverHour for time tracking, to be able to catch things like that early. EverHour has this it's like a little progress bar almost that you could see at the top of every project in Clickup, and it alerts you if you're getting to a certain percentage of the way there. So that way, like you can, if you don't have that bucket of hours already existing as like an extra set of hours, that you can, alert them when it's early enough and not when it's, we're already at the end. Oh, we actually are going, we're already over hours. But just kind of doing that ahead of time and getting ahead of things.
Yep, great. My understanding, I guess, also is a lot of this is about how two people can be told the same thing and hear something entirely different. So, it's often that reiteration. You got to tell people things 3 times in different ways. So there's a document. We're going to repeat what that document means. We're going to do this because often the client is going to hear, in a way, the thing that they need to hear in order to get the project done. And so, they may not be understanding your side of it. And so that reiteration of just consistently, repeating it seems to be very key as well. So we'll give time for one more question and then we'll kind of wrap up. So how do you deal with, I guess, or do you deal with clients being very excited, I guess, at the beginning of a complicated project and then maybe drifting off as the project goes on in terms of less, I guess, less involved, being less able to give you the time that you need because obviously other things come up, and if that's a long-term project, is that a thing that you deal with, and how do you deal with it?
It's not super common. I will say, I think we have the benefit of working with really great clients who, do pull their weight in projects and stick with us and stay engaged the whole way through. Some of our clients will have sort of like a restructuring during a project where different people are being put on the team. And I think that's when we kind of see things fall out because people are moving around, point of contacts are moving around. And we've definitely had a few big projects where all of a sudden our main point of contact is no longer there. And people are trying to learn the project, learn their tasks while helping us through. So I think in that case, we really just try to be patient with our clients. If things seem to be dragging on very long, we will, put a clause in and say this project needs to be completed by this certain time. Otherwise, we need to start a new scope for it. So that's something that we try to do, but we really do try to understand that everybody has a lot going on. And so being patient and understanding why, a client might not be engaged or why they're not there. We try to first ask them, what we can do to help before just assuming that they're trying to make our lives difficult.
Yeah, great. And you mentioned earlier kind of starting or pausing a project if it really gets down to it is just until everything's back in line and ready to go again. All right, great. We'll wrap it up there. There's a few other questions in there, but for anybody, we'll send out contact details. So if anybody wants to get in touch with any of us, we can do it. Just very quickly, do you want to give me the 3-point summary of the 3 takeaways that are needed for best running great website development projects and retaining clients?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, clarity is key. Stay on top of communication and really put in that time before a project even starts. It can be super annoying, but it goes a really long way. The second thing, kind of exactly what I said just now, understand that a lot of people have other stuff going on in work, in life, at home. Being patient and understanding of that is really key and really trying to make things easy for them. And then the last thing is just to have fun with it. We spend a lot of time at work. We spend a lot of time with clients and colleagues. And, if you need to pause and bring your animal up on screen to lighten the day, then definitely do that because it really does make a difference for everyone.
Sorry, I missed part of that. I'm sure everyone else heard it, but I missed part because I accidentally pressed the wrong button. on the thing, but oh well, we went so well the last couple of minutes. All right. Anyway, thanks very much, Sai. Thanks very much, Sophia. It was great having a chat to you. As anyone mentioned, we'll send out. I don't know if they're still here. Oh no, they are. We will send out contact details after this. So if anyone wants to get in touch. Thanks everyone for attending, and yeah, that's
Awesome.
the end. Appreciate it.
Thank you.